Setting up shop.
Hello, everyone, and welcome again to Setting Up Shop, the Maker Journey podcast, where we talk about taking your hobby through to the professional level, and we give you some of our own anecdotes on the way. So I'm Dan, I'm a woodworker from the UK, and with me are Heidi Jacobs, a ceramicist from America, and Rasmus Loen, a blacksmith from Norway. I nearly got his name very wrong there, and I probably still did.
It's close enough for comfort.
Close enough for English people, anyway.
Yeah.
How are you both?
I'm good.
Can't complain.
Good. So this is episode 5, I believe, officially. It's the 6th recording, but the first one being the introduction. No?
It's the 4th number's 5th recording.
Well, there you go. I'm not very good with numbers, which is something that's always bad when you're trying to run a business. That's always something to mention as well. We will discuss that in a future episode for sure. Hopefully, you've all enjoyed the journey so far. You're finding it helpful. Certainly, from the feedback that we will have received, we have already had some, and a lot of people are enjoying it and finding it helpful at the moment. This is the time really when I should mention those of you who have emailed in, those of you who have messaged us, please don't be upset if we haven't mentioned anything yet. We are pre-recording these podcasts. Main reason we're doing this is because all 3 of us are going to go exceptionally busy when it comes towards the Christmas season. So we have pre-recorded a season so it can be released up until then, and we can then speak about all of the inquiries and things if we haven't already individually replied to you on next season's podcast. I just thought I should mention that now, as people have probably already started to message in and might get upset if we don't talk about anything. So we're not ignoring you guys. It's just a pre-record, and then we'll follow on in the season in the new year. So this week, what we're going to talk about, we've called it Preparing Your Shop. We're talking mostly about going to your first market and kind of the things to take along with you, how to display it, some tips and tricks that we've got there, and also how to get around some potential bad conversations you might have or bad experiences you might have, whether that be with customers, other traders, and all that kind of stuff. But none of it should be too heavy, so no trigger warnings as far as I'm aware. So first of all, we're going to talk about what you should bring to a market. Some of this is going to be really obvious and others not so much. And some of it's going to be very much dependent on the type of market you're going to. So for instance, if it's outdoors, there's going to be a different set of requirements from if you're managing to get a pitch inside a hall somewhere or something like that. Heidi, what would you say are the first 3 things you should make sure you always take with you?
Well, can we just say, obviously the product is number one, right? So the first 3 things, aside from the obvious product, is your setup. So tent, table, chair, how you're going to market your tent. So I would also make sure that I had some kind of signage, that kind of thing that would bring people to my tent. And then the third thing would be water. Lots of water.
For drinking, we're assuming.
Yes, for drinking.
Okay. Just in case, just covering.
Yes.
Wasn't entirely sure whether you used it to make some special way to make your ceramics shinier or something some bizarre trick that we weren't aware of. Okay, no, that's fine. So it's interesting that you've lumped a few things in together. I'm actually going to be quite controversial, and this is a subject that I know some people will speak about. Chairs at a market stall. Okay.
Mm-hmm. I have opinions.
You are going to be there for the whole day, and if you're not fortunate enough to have someone who can come along with you so you can sort of spot each other when going to the toilet or wandering around or just needing a break or whatever. We originally had the whole kind of folding up camping chairs at ours. There is nothing more kind of off-putting to me than walking near a craft stand and happening to see someone sat in a fold-up camping chair, which is lower anyway than the table, and you happen to walk up when they're on their phone. So there's no engagement. So I bought us, still fold up, still easy to transport, but we just bought the little triangular stools. So it makes you like, you can't slump in it, because if you try and slump, you just fall backwards off it. So you can still take the weight off your feet and you can still rest, but you kind of have to sit upright, and you have to be kind of, okay, you might still look at your phone and whatever. That's a whole other subject matter. But I personally went down the kind of the stools route rather than the chairs route, purely from encouraging a postural kind of, hey, look, we can still be engaged with and we're still here.
I like that. And I was going to say something along the same lines, maybe even to the effect of getting something nearly at the height of a bar stool so that you are almost standing. But
I mean, it depends on space in your vehicle and everything else. And none of this is a criticism of Heidi. We should all make this very clear. We haven't just muted her and cut her out of the conversation. But this is a genuine thing. Like,
I'm not offended.
That's fine. I will get hypey, detail orientated on stuff, and I know a lot of our listeners will as well. If you go around to a market and you look at people's stalls, doesn't matter what the person looks like individually at this point, but just look at the way that they're presenting the image forward. And I have been guilty of it more than a lot of other people. I do have a resting grumpy face, and if it's near the end of a long day and you're tired, it can be very difficult to project a smile the whole time. Like, people say that a wedding day is the worst day for like face ache. Yeah, they haven't been on a multiple market run like, several days on end, where you've been getting up early and bringing your stock in and trying to be polite to everyone and encouraging and all that kind of stuff. But definitely make sure you do bring something that allows you to take the weight off your feet. Make sure you've got decent cover and tables and things like that. What about you then, Rasmus? What would you bring as the next obvious ones?
I would always bring with me some marketing material, whether that is flyers for classes or like equipment I'm selling, or if that is just normal business cards, like something you can hand over to people that they can remember you by.
Yeah,
I find that really important. But also a way to get money from people. Preferably multiple ways of getting money out of people. I was lucky that I got on the whole iSettle thing really early, or it became common just as I was starting out. So I sort of got a hold of that just as I needed it. And it's been a godsend, basically, because before that, there was no good way of taking money from people at the market.
Yeah. And
then suddenly you had a card reader that attached to your smartphone and can just do everything super easy for you.
Yeah, definitely. So that was one of the first things I did as well. And it's worth hunting around and finding the right kind of reader that will meet your requirements. I would say as well on that, those don't be tight. Some of them, like the Zettel system, was more expensive. Percentages, so it's worth knowing on the card reader they will take a percentage of your sale. That's how it pays for itself. Like you've got to recognize that, but the percentage is normally under 2%. It's like 1.4 or 1.5 depending on the system you go with. Just because one's more money, don't immediately discount it. Have a look at what you're getting for that. So for instance, I went with the Zettel because it would also take Apple Pay for that extra money. It would also take American Express for that money, which isn't very common in the UK. But if you start targeting higher end markets where people who are a bit more affluent, they are more likely to have that kind of card. You want to be able to take that money.
Or if you go into more of selling to tourists, you would need to figure out what they would like to pay with.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's also worth knowing as well, exactly like you said, Rasmus, don't just take a card machine. You want to make it really difficult for people to not give you money. So what I mean by that is, you've got to be able to accept cash as well. So having change. So if people say, I've only got a £50 note or something, which isn't necessarily likely in the UK. I'm not sure what the direct translation would be in Norwegian.
We are a salmon-based economy at this point.
You're a salmon-based economy at this point. Yeah. Well, it's that explains an awful lot about we won't go into personal hygiene issues about when we hug you, Rasmus. But now we know it's a salmon-based economy. That's explains a lot. So whatever the direct translation would be on currency, you want to give people no excuse to buy what you think, and don't get me wrong though, I have occasionally had success if someone says, oh, I want to buy this thing, but I've only got X amount of money, rather than saying, oh, well, sorry, I haven't got any change, say, that's fine. If you get this as well, you potentially increase the sales in that. That can be a way of doing it. Something both of you also drew attention to was the whole marketing thing. So whether it's flyers on a table, banner at the back of the stand, pop-up banner, whatever it is, or all of them, it's really important to remember no one's going to tell anyone about you except for you. Like you might buy, or you rent the pitch space from the market, and you might have bought yourself or hired a gazebo or tent or whatever to put in the space. But if it's just a plain coloured tent and you're there with a table with a cloth on it, what are you? What's there to draw people into you? What's the thing that's going to make people stay and want to have a conversation? What's the dynamic? What's the kind of thing? My wife's very recently bought me a tablet device so that I can just literally download any reels or videos I do, put them on a loop, and have that on the table, so that it's there showing people, I make my stuff. This isn't imported from a foreign nation. This has all been handmade by me. So you've got to champion yourself. You've really got to champion yourself and your products, and tell people in several different ways, because people won't listen the first time around, won't pay attention. You don't know why they've come here. They might have just been coming and taking the dog for a walk and didn't realize the market was on. What's their focus? Where's their brain at? They're not necessarily come to specifically come and see you in your little bubble. So you have to kind of, in a nice, polite, comforting way, ingratiate them towards you, and bring them in. Like you said, Rasmus, oh, did you know I do courses? I don't just sell roses. I also teach people how to make this, that, and whatever else. And the same with your stuff, Heidi, isn't it? It's like, it's not just this style of mug that I make. I can also do a huge amount of other things. And it can also be explaining your credentials as well to people, can't it? You can kind of put things like that on there and make it clear that it isn't just you sat in your little room at home, occasionally turning some things, or, spinning up the pottery wheel and when you feel like it.
Yeah, I think one of the funny things is that if you are in a situation where you are, super close to the people to the left and to the right of you, I've had it where I get teased about my marketing pitch, when people come into my booth and I'm explaining to them what I do and who I am, and, they can recite it at the end of the day, because I try and use the same thing over and over and over again, so that I know what my elevator pitch is to explain to people. Because a lot of people are like, wait, like, how do you do this? You make all of this? Because that's like one of the conversations that ends up happening. Is like, people come in my booth and I have so many different versions of mugs and different styles and different things, like nerd mugs and Sasquatch mugs and local highlights mugs and plain mugs. People are like, whoa, this is one person? What? So the people around me, it happens at almost every market. People will tease me like that they know my life story, and they have it memorized, and they forget that, like, when people come to their booth, not to tell them my story. But it's one of those things, like you learn how to, number one, speak about your craft, how to speak about yourself, how to read the audience. Like, some people don't want to come in your tent and talk to you, and that's completely fine. And it's trying to figure out, like, what am I doing so that I'm not being too much pressure on them to communicate with me, but also, like, how do I make my environment friendly, so that people do feel like they can ask me questions or whatever. And usually what I say is like, hey, welcome to my tent. Feel free to touch anything, pick up anything, check it out, see if it fits you. Let me know if you have any questions. It's usually as simple as that. But but a lot of people tease me.
It's an interesting point, though, that you make, that the booths either side of you are able to recite your pitch by the end of the day, because what that tells me is that they're not engaging with customers.
Oh, maybe not. Yeah. Or maybe they don't have customers to engage with.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, if the people are drawn to your tent and you're the one giving the pitch and they haven't got someone at the same time, or then, and you're in the middle of the row, you're not at the beginning of a row where people will walk along. Like, if they're able to recite your pitch back, that means they're paying far more attention to you than they are to their own stuff.
I didn't even think about that.
And that's a trap that I've fallen into a few times. Like, you see someone next to you being successful and you spend so much time watching them, you forget to look at the front and go, hey, look, people might be coming to you and like wanting to look at your stuff or whatever. But because you're disengaged and your focus is elsewhere, they're not going to feel invited. They're not going to feel like that they want to come in.
Yeah.
So it's, I would take that as a compliment. I would take that as people going,
see, I thought it was just being
successful. No, well, they probably are, but and they probably are doing it in like a fun, jokey way. But at the same time, there's probably a little bit of like, well, but how do I do that? And that kind of thing.
Oh gosh, I'm so naive.
Not at all. Not at all. I'm just over analytical on everything.
I know. I totally took it as me being like, I need to change things up.
No. Based on sales figures you and I have discussed in the past, not at all.
Yeah.
If anything, you need to teach me and Raz how to do our own patter and improve that.
Yeah. Heidi's course to people pleasing.
Maybe don't call it that.
Oh yes.
What a trick that I've certainly found, and this isn't bringing something to the stand necessarily, but going off the back of that, don't assume that if a couple or group of people walk into your booth, that the person at the front is the one most interested.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have to try and not exclude anyone in the group, but you can quickly work out after it's happened a few times which people are actually interested and which people are just part of the group and following along. And if you're really lucky, the amount of people who are interested you can convert over the period of time they're in there, and it will grow. But just because there's 5 people in your booth doesn't mean that 5 people are going to buy something. In fact, more often than not means one person's going to buy something. Yeah. If you're really lucky, you'll get one of them egging on the others to buy more than one thing. But you need to learn how to kind of read the people and the situation in order to kind of like, when do you push and when do you just allow them to do what they're going to do.
On that note, I often find it can be very beneficial as well to interact with the kids more than their parents.
Yeah.
Depending on how fragile things are. In my world, they can't really break anything. Yeah, they shouldn't probably like pick up the axes and the knives and start running around. But apart from that, they can touch pretty much anything and it will be fine. Yeah. And also like saying to them, you can do that. And like, I make a lot of like key fobs with paw prints on them and just interacting with them and saying like, do you recognize the animal of this? I have the leaf hooks, just asking them, do you recognize what tree this is? And go on things like that. That's even that, and just like maybe talking them through the process of making something if they are really baffled by it. But interacting with the kids can be a brilliant way of getting more interaction from the parents who are the one with the wallet.
Absolutely. So on that note, and kind of sort of expanding it a little bit, most of the things that I make, because it's wood-based, are all a very similar color, a similar sort of range of browns, and for quite a while the tablecloth on my table that I used to use was like Hessian sacking, which was very in for a period of time and could also be classed as a bit wedding-y, which is also brown. I literally today I had a couple of really nice, a couple of nice oak plate racks that I'd made to stand things up and all this kind of stuff, and we'll get onto that in a moment. I've just repainted them a kind of bright teal, greeny blue kind of color, which is going to become probably one of my new brand colors. Because one of the things I can't remember, I think it was probably a couple of you guys mentioned actually, was the whole element of where's the fun? Like if you look at a stand from a distance, whether you're a small child or you're a physically larger child, and when we're talking about guys, certainly, what draws your eyes to a stand? Like if it's all one monotone color, whether that's brown, cream, gray, black, whatever, it's not eye-catching. It's not going to take people there. Like if we think about social media, what draws the attention? It's moving images. It's not still pictures necessarily anymore. It's, you know, all that kind of stuff. So you don't want to become a reel or a TikTok video, but you equally, you know, the brain engagement, like 10 seconds, you've got to think about how much time they will actually spend looking and registering what's there. So if you haven't got diversity of color and contrast and things, and so a couple of things that we bring to ours is we put pot plants out, and we put like bigger ones on the floor, and we put smaller ones around the table and everything. So this does two things. One, it adds a range of color. And the other one is it helps people kind of see it more as a homely thing and visualize your stuff in their house. And at the end of the day, that's what you need to do. You need to persuade people that this is going to look good in their home, even if it is an axe. You know, everyone.
You say that like people don't have access in their home.
Well, you know, maybe not by the front door like you might, but you know.
No, over the fireplace. Come on.
Over the fireplace. Oh, okay, fair enough. Crossed with a shield as well, yeah? Or is that too British?
No, that's fine.
But it's that element of trying to make it a lot more welcoming and a lot more like, I can see this in my house. I'm more likely to buy it. And then going back to that thing about, hey, you know, engage the kids or whatever. Not everyone has children, but I can guarantee you if it's an outdoor market, particularly in the UK, there will be a higher than likelihood chance that people will take the dogs along with them as well for a walk. So something I know that Heidi does and something I'm considering doing as well is putting out a dog bowl of water, particularly if it's a super hot day. If you've got, you know, clear bottled water or whatever, not everyone's going to appreciate it and not everyone's necessarily going to partake of it, but it's a conversation starter. And even if all it gets is a smile and a thank you from someone, they're more likely to remember you if this is a market that you're going to go at a repeat event. So that's definitely something, you know, and if you've got products, like you said, Rasmus, where you've got, you know, maybe a paw print, not necessarily of a dog, but things that are vaguely related, sometimes that will bring people to the stand who are like, well, you know, they supplied water, I've not had to do it. Actually, maybe I'll look at their stuff and then maybe I'll give them, you know, I'll buy a trinket sized item. I'll give them the sub $10, sub £10 item as kind of a thank you, which can be helpful as well. Speaking of money and speaking of knowing how much things are, price tags, labels.
Yes.
Not everyone is confident enough to ask you how much something is. And even if they are confident enough, not everyone wants to.
That's sort of, again, everything with the money question for me is it should be as absolutely easy as possible for the customer to figure out what to sort of how to walk away with the thing they like, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But more importantly, for creators to get paid.
Yeah.
And I've been toying around with a few different ideas. One is like having some dish and having just, for example, key fobs and things like, here's a dish, lots of tiny small things, one price tag for the whole dish. Then you have pricing individual items, which are slightly bigger. But also, if you have like a plethora of options and varieties that all are slightly different, for example, the roses I make that are different sizes and different materials, usually iron and stainless, having a simple price scheme, like a small format thing where it's just like small, medium, large downwards, and then across going iron and stainless, and just saying like, here's a quick explanation for that. Having it make it easy for them to notice what the thing they're holding is worth and what it will take to walk home with it.
Yeah. I just had a bit of a thought, and I wish I'd realized this when I started doing markets. If you assume that all of your customers are deaf and dumb, so therefore they are unable to communicate with you unless you happen to know the same sign language as they do, how would they purchase from you if you haven't made it super clear what something is and how much it is, and that yes, you will take the payment method that they offer. So if you,
that is kind of a good metric, yeah.
If you kind of work off that basis of, that's what I'm having to work with, then I currently now need to restructure everywhere. I price everything based on that, which is fine. Making it as simple as possible. This is going off what you were saying, Rasmus, making it as simple as possible for people to walk up to your stand, to know what they're looking at, to know how much it is, and to know how they can pay for it. If they then do not want to speak to you at all, other than literally pick something up and hand it to you and hold a card up, that's fine. That's not a problem at all. Just, package it, take the money, whatever, that kind of thing. And you can still be perfectly pleasant about it. Yeah. So my brain's gone spiraling off now on all the things I need to do to update my market stand for before the next one, which is good. It's part of the reason for doing this podcast.
You'll experiment and do 500 different things and still never feel like you really nailed it.
Yeah. And that's an important thing as well, though, isn't it? Is like be prepared for the fact that there are things that you think that you should do differently each time.
Yeah.
Like the whole reason why marketing is called marketing is because people would take stuff to a market and see if it worked and it would sell and bring people to it, and then they would experiment with something different. You won't make the perfect market booth the first time you do it. And let's be honest, you kind of never will. You might hit your stride like Heidi and have a system that works really well for you, is relatively easy to adapt and set up depending on whether it's indoor, outdoor, and what size space you have. But you won't necessarily know that you can always put things out the same way. Like Rasmus, if you were going to one of the like medieval reenactment things, there's half your stock you probably wouldn't necessarily even take with you. But even if you did, if I was displaying your stuff at one of those, I'd be getting like sheepskins and pelts and stuff, and like, laying things out on that. I wouldn't even necessarily, I think if I was going to have a table, I'd want to like clad it in something and make it look older and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and that's sort of a journey all in itself, and sort of tailoring and customizing your booth for every single market, or at least the types of market you do. Of course, and that's also the thing. Like in the beginning, just get there, like just lay things on a table and just start seeing what items people are most attracted to. And then I did this a lot in the beginning of just, people seem to be touching these things a bit more and commenting and talking about these things a bit more. Let me push those a bit more forward, make them easier to see, and I organize things around it so that their gaze can flow from that to other things. Yeah. And I realized that helped sales a little bit. And it's also one of the things of, it's difficult when you don't have a formal education in it for me. Yeah. But it's a lot of just trial and error. And I would walk around my booth and I would stare at it like for 5 minutes with my back to all of the customers approaching. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. What do you think?
Yeah. We all do that.
I like that I like what Dan said about it being like, this is the definition of marketing, right? Like and I think it's important to express like there is no wrong way to do this other than to not show up. Right?
Absolutely.
That would be the only wrong way. There are things that we all three collectively have learned about what is best based on our personalities. So obviously I'm an extrovert. I like talking to people. I like people picking up my pieces and seeing how they feel and experimenting with them and, testing out different ones. And, I also know that I don't want to price my mugs differently based on application. So I've learned that if I just choose the higher price point and make all of my mugs to that higher price point, then it saves me and my community a lot of effort when they're trying to figure out what my pricing is. That way it's just all my mugs, I banged my mic, sorry. All my mugs are $35 and all of my tankards are $40 and all of my bowls are $20 and all of my tumblers are $20. That way there's no I don't want it to be a complex experience for anyone.
Yeah.
And I don't like answering the pricing question over and over again, which is also why I had done a menu before where it was like, this shape mug is this price and this shape mug is this price. And, that was great, but it was almost like a wasted effort because nobody saw it or nobody paid attention to it.
Because I did a menu once, and I found it distracted people. Like they spent more time looking at the piece of paper and trying to work out what was what product and everything and the price, that by the time they'd done that, they'd lost interest. And that was time that they should have been spending picking the item up, looking at it and going, oh, I really like this, and then asking how much it is. You kind of want the committal to buying before they've discovered what the price is. So for me, and sounds like for Heidi as well, the whole kind of like having, whether it's an A5, A4, whatever size thing with a breakdown of what things are, we haven't found that works for us, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't for other people. I think it's a really good description that you've used there of menu. If you're not selling food, that's possibly not the way to go unless you only have like 4 items. They're really easily distinguished between what they are. Because that's the other thing. So you've just listed off tumblers and platters and all this kind of stuff. There will still be people out there who, if you say tumbler, they won't realize what you're talking about on your stand. So you've got to kind of, like we said, sorry?
I drew pictures.
All right, fair enough. But there will still be, going back to what we said almost in like sort of episode 1 kind of time, is get other people who are not a similar creator to look over your stuff before you put it out, so that they can look at it and say, what's that? So, one of my products is called a trencher plate. Unless I showed a picture of what that was, literally no one would know unless it was hung on a piece of paper around the physical item. They're not going to know just because you've given it a name or it's based on something. If they don't know what that is, they don't know what they're looking at. So labeling is really important. However you play with that. One of the things that
Can I tell you what I ended up doing?
Go on. Yeah.
So I moved away from the menu sign, but I just like to call it the menu sign because it's what it feels like to me. Like,
but it is. It's exactly what it is. Yeah.
So I do individually tag with a little piece of string and a little card that I get printed with my logo on it. And then I put a little sticker on the back with the price, and then I tie it on the mug handles. And sometimes on other things, but that to me in a way elevated me from just being a run-of-the-mill potter who just pulls things out of their kiln and puts them on a table to I'm taking the time to merchandise. So I think there's a big difference between just having a table with stuff on it and effectively merchandising your work. And whether that's like adding packaging to your items or adding tags or whatever, I think that is a consideration too, to just elevate your product in your space a little bit more. And that, I think that's probably something easier to do with things like soap and, chocolates and that kind of thing. But with pottery, that's the way I did it.
Yeah. Wrapping round plates is not a fun job that my wife or I enjoy at all. But it is part of the whole experience though, Heidi. You're quite right. Carrier bags. How are people taking your stuff away? And if you're going to provide bags, whether or not you want them recycled or not, whether you buy them in or not, are they going to be strong enough to take away what you're taking? Raz, you and I have discussed in the past a little bit that you paid extra money for the premium bag because what you sell is heavier, it's metal, some of it's sharp, etc.
Yeah.
You want to know that people can walk comfortably around a market and get back to home or their vehicle without the product falling on the floor, because there will then be a negative connotation to you and your brand.
And also I didn't want the bags I handed them to detract from the feeling or quality I was selling.
Yes.
So it was also the whole point of, which I got, is people getting a bag from me with their thing and saying, wow, that's a nice bag.
Yeah.
And it's nothing special. It is black. It has a rope handle. but the quality and solidity of it is way beyond what most other people will bring to market.
Yeah, definitely.
And the benefit is I don't often need to give them a bag because they often have already bought something from somewhere else, or they might be carrying a bag, or what they're buying is small enough to fit in pockets.
Yeah.
So I ask them, do you want a bag with that? More often than not, they say no. I think maybe a third of the customers, if maybe that much, will actually want a bag. So buying the premium one just gives those few people who want one and need one a really good boost, and it doesn't cost me that much.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, with the bags as well, there's the packaging situation where if you choose to wrap things, depends what you're selling. I mean, all the items I'm selling are wooden. Realistically, like if you drop it, it might get a dent in it, but I still wrap them in tissue paper, potentially a bit of bubble wrap, and then it goes in a bag depending on what the item is. Which I know that Heidi's kind of smiling a little bit about, because how do you package your mugs, Heidi, when you send them on?
I wrap them a lot. Well, when I ship them, I put them in
at the market, Heidi.
But at the market, if they buy more than one piece, then I'll put one piece in a bag without wrapping, which I probably should do. Put wrapping on everything, but I'm a bit stingy when it comes to the wrapping.
But you're highlighting an important point. Wrapping costs money.
Mm-hmm.
Like it costs profit, doesn't it? So unless you're fortunate, through my day job and my wife's day job, we get an awful lot of deliveries, and therefore we get excess packaging. So we're recycling bubble wrap or the cardboard-based packaging or whatever else it might be. We're recycling it from the workplace who would otherwise have to pay for the recycling to be taken away. That's fine. We've got access to that. But I wouldn't buy a roll of bubble wrap to take with me to a market to then wrap it, because that's straight away out the profit margin. But it's all things like that are definitely worth considering. A couple of the more mundane items, stuff to take to market with you. If you're outside and you've got some form of tent or gazebo, weights for the legs. You don't want to find out at the wrong time that you haven't weighted it down enough and it goes flying. It's I've seen it happen, and it's not an enjoyable experience. Similarly, if you are intending selling delicate, lightweight items such as jewelry, make sure that whatever they are displayed on is weighted enough that a gust of wind won't blow it over. And if you're a wood turner who has spent a lot of time turning a nice, delicate, lightweight serving tray 12 inches in diameter, and you've proudly displayed it higher up on a nice little book stand thing, don't do that when it's a tarmac or concrete floor underneath. And if you do, once the first one's blown off, take the second one down so that one doesn't also do that. Don't ask me how I know.
Sounds like experience.
Dan, on a side note, would you consider yourself a slow learner?
Yes.
Sorry.
Along
there was a word for people like me many years ago. We're not allowed to use it anymore.
Along the lines of making sure that your tent is weighted, I think, at least for me, it was important to have insurance. Because things do happen where even if the tent is weighted, you might be asked to leave your tent and materials overnight, and there may be security, but there's always a chance that something happens overnight, that your product gets damaged, stolen, something crazy could happen. Last year, I was invited to an event. I ended up with COVID, so I couldn't go, but a bunch of my friends attended the event, and there was a freak microburst mini tornado that just ripped through the entire tented area. And there were people that were stained glass people. There were people with candles that were in like glass containers. There were people that had very delicate paper crafts. and they lost everything. And those that had insurance had everything covered. It was kind of a pain for them to file claims and everything, but depending on your insurance, most of the cost of your materials and products can be covered, including your tent. Like the one girl had her tent completely replaced by her insurance. So I know, like, we don't always like to think about the possibility of catastrophe, but it is good to keep in mind. And in the States, at least, the larger markets require some type of weekend insurance.
Yeah,
and
there are UK ones do too. Yeah.
And it's just think ahead, look at the weather, think about, am I going to be overly hot? Am I going to be soaking wet? And, is there a chance that a freak storm might happen because they're calling for winds? Just be cognizant of the things that you can control and be aware that there are nightmare stories that you can learn from and be prepared for.
Yeah.
Do you have things that rust? Is there going to be a heavy fog coming in?
Yeah.
Do you have things that rust? Oh, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Or wooden items that if they get condensation overnight and all that kind of stuff. So I think definitely worth paying attention to weather and also seasons. So, we're releasing this in September. We're talking about people potentially going to their first Christmas market. It's going to get darker in a lot of the countries that's going to happen in, unless you're in the Southern Hemisphere. Lights are really worthwhile bringing along, whether or not it's battery-powered twinkly fairy lights and lots of them, or whether they're, most importantly, make sure that they're rechargeable battery ones, is because you're not going to have access all the time to power. But make sure things are well lit up so that people can access it and see it. I've got on there just as a default packs of cable ties, like not to be clearly visible and displayed, or zip ties, whatever you want to call them, but really handy for if you have to make a quick repair on like the wall of a tent or something that's just flapping around, or if you want to strap something to it or whatever, all of that kind of good stuff. And I think, two important ones. One is food. Okay.
Yes.
The first couple of times you go to a market stand, and I will pass over to you in a minute, Raz, don't worry, this is your first subject. The first couple of times you go to a market, it can be really exciting, and you're like, there's a really good like fast food van just over there. I'll have that for lunch, and I'll go and have that. And then like it's not too busy at the moment, so there's someone over there selling sweets, and I kind of could do with the sugar boost, so I'll go over there. Or next to them is a guy who does a really good brownie. Be wary of overspending. Like by all means, you want to enjoy yourself, but equally, if your first few markets, if you the chances of having high turnover are not necessarily that great, and you can easily end up spending all your profit on the nice, attractive food from the vendors around you. Which, if you want to do as a loss leader just to get the experience, that's up to you. If you want to make a business model out of this, like bring snacks, bring a packed lunch or whatever. Treat this as a day at work. That's what it is. It is a day at work. You want to have fun. You want to enjoy the experience, but it is a day at work. If on your normal day job, you would go out and buy your lunch, fine. That's not a problem. And I'll be the first to admit that if you set up at 7:30 in the morning in the winter, that a bacon sandwich is normally one of the first jobs that is greeted with you after that. But just bear it in mind. That's kind of an important thing, I think, we can all agree on. Don't you think, Raz?
Yeah. I would even go as far as, which I have ended up doing, but not very consciously, is prioritize markets that actually hand out food to the exhibitors. Not a whole lot. Maybe it's just like a cup of coffee and a waffle.
Are you often welcome back to these markets?
Surprisingly, I am. Also because they might have leftovers at the end of the day, and they walk around with them, and I always look very happy when they come to me for some odd reason. But that's more of maybe just the culture of Norway, and maybe it's just a bit of overlap with these are people who are more invested in everybody having a good time than squeezing as much money as possible out of this market.
Yeah.
So where you're going to a market where they come around and check on you. They walk around with water, with coffee, maybe even with food or snacks. Those are the markets I would want to go back to because they care about how I'm doing a lot more.
Yeah.
And often enough, those are the markets where I ended up selling the most as well.
Yeah, because everyone's happy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But as you said, like treat it as a day of work because that is what it is to your business. Yeah. Maybe have a budget that you set up and where you say like, this is the amount I can indulge myself with, because you are supposed to have a good time. You're not supposed to be suffering while at the market.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But if you can put a budget down and say like, yes, I can buy some sweets, I can buy something, because also I want to interact with more of the other people selling things, especially if they're food vendors. Like it's almost sad to say it, but you are in that sense also broadening your network. You're getting to know more people.
Yeah. And most important thing of all with that, particularly when it's throughout the day, anyone that you go and approach, you don't have to do it really in a gross and blatant way. Make sure they know that you've got a stall at the market as well. And the reason why I say that is I'd been to the same monthly market for 4 months, and it was only on the fourth month. I think you told the story. I might have done already
as well.
Probably did, but I'll tell it again.
Yeah, short version. That's fine.
Yeah, it was only after like the 3rd or 4th month that the guy realised I was a market stall holder there, and I got discount for what I was for the beverage that I was purchasing. And some of the people will do that. There is no obligation for any of you to offer discount to fellow marketeers, as it were. But equally, it might stand you in good stead if there is margin for you to do that. Just as a sort of thing, I generally speaking offer 10% off everything on my stand to other people who are already at the market. It helps generate a little bit of turnover sometimes at the beginning or the end of the market. It can sometimes even just cover the cost of your pitch fee before you've got started. So it can be quite a nice little thing. And sometimes the people who have bought it will then have it at their stand and people say, where did you get that? And it can, and they'll talk nicely about it too, because you have given them a bit of discount, that kind of thing. The final one then on what to bring to market is and Raz, you used the word gimmick. It's a thing to draw people to your stand that a lot of other people probably haven't got. So I was going to say a bit boring. I suppose it can be boring depending on your interest. The thing I did last Christmas is I had a slice through piece of an elm tree. So where the bark had been all the way around, I'd sanded the top flat and I put that across the front of my table. And the amount of people who would walk past and just trail their fingers over it because of the grain. And it was just meant as a large display, kind of like table center kind of charcuterie board type thing. It wasn't huge, but it was different enough that it made people want to come and interact and get the tactile feel and that kind of thing. But you've got a slightly different idea for something that you would like to do for your gimmick, haven't you, Raz?
Yeah, and ironically enough, I finally have the perfect anvil for this, despite this is now my 10th or 11th anvil that I bought, is to have a small anvil I can bring to markets. Not to do proper work, but to tinker with things. Maybe I can use it, I have like a set of letter stamps. I can engrave someone's name on the spot. I've sold some bracelets. Maybe I can adjust it for them on that small anvil while I'm there. Maybe I can just texture some roses, just have a few with me, just so that I make some noise. And if the market is super slow, I get something done. And especially when it comes to blacksmithing, I mean, the sound, it carries really well. And it helps attract people.
Just need to be wary of annoying your neighbors as well.
Yeah, that's why it's really nice to give them a discount beforehand. Sort of bribe them to just please tolerate me for this weekend.
Do you have anything like that in mind, Heidi? Do you have like a big piece that you would do or anything that draws people in?
Actually, it's really not about the work. I wear crazy overalls.
Yeah.
Every time, just to like make people aware of the booth and give people an opportunity to be like, oh yeah, it's the girl in the red flowered overalls, or it's the girl with the leopard print, you know, like just something iconic for people to remember me. And also like it boosts my social media too. So if I'm at a market and I'm sharing what I'm doing, I get a lot of engagement with that too. I know it sounds really silly to care about your clothing when you're at a market.
I think it's really good.
But it's helped me, and it's also a conversation starter. So Dan, similar to your large slab, like I'm sure people are like, oh, well, that's really nice, you know, and then it draws them into conversation. Absolutely. Unfortunately, it's not, like nothing to do with my pottery. And it's like, where did you get those overalls? Where did you get those cover-ups? You know, like those are super rad. And then it turns into like why I wear them, or like what I like about them, or, you know, that, you know, I sometimes work in them, and it's, I don't know. Go ahead, Ross, you were saying.
No, it's definitely a way to draw people in. I did craft in my own head when I was thinking about going to my first market stalls. I was like, right, my stuff is kind of historically inspired. I want to subtly remind people of kind of like that bygone era of the workmen who would, certainly in the UK, you know, they would go in the leather shoes and the trousers, and they'd have like a white collarless shirt on, black cotton vest top over that, and then they'd wear an apron over that. And I thought, well, I'm not wearing an apron while I stand at the market stall stand. I'm not working. It's not what I'm doing. And I didn't happen to have the kind of the waistcoat described, but I did buy a collarless shirt, and I put on a nice tweed waistcoat over the top, because part of the country that we're in, that's kind of, you know, it's the rural area, it's the countryside, so it kind of links into that as well. And that works great in the spring and summer months. When it's winter, then there's another 4 layers or more on top of that, and it's kind of pointless.
I mean, so that just means you need to figure out what your gimmick is for winter season if you're outside.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, my gimmick for winter should be I wear shorts and t-shirt, and everyone can come and like point and laugh. No,
you said that you didn't think that you should be suffering when you're at your store.
No, absolutely. No, absolutely. No, I for me personally, I've got a couple of large pieces of timber. I want to turn some really big things that will have a large price tag on them. So the chances of them selling are not high. But if they do, fantastic. But it makes people go, what the hell is that kind of idea? Anything you do that is safe and fun and all of that kind of thing. I do have one friend who they go to a market, and they have a friend who comes along as their helper. So if you haven't got a partner who's able to or willing to come along, then it's always good to have a helper, so that someone who can watch the stand if you need to take a convenience break or something like that. But this particular person, their friend, is an avid cosplayer. And so they will occasionally just turn up in costume.
Because, that's good.
You know, there's not a convention on, but I want to try out this new look of this, whatever. And it's like, whatever. I'm not even sure. I can't remember what she told me last. I think someone said last time she cosplayed as Rapunzel from Tangled or something like that.
Yeah.
So she was like, you know, answering. So again, back to what you said, Reyes, all of the kids wanted to come to the stand, you know, and they don't charge for it or anything like that. And I think they actually ended up with more people coming to take selfies with Rapunzel than her selling anything. So you've got to kind of manage the situation a little bit. But yeah, definitely a gimmick would be sort of thing there.
If I may shoot in a little bit when it comes to sort of attire thing, ideally you want to be going to the same markets year over year because they're good for you.
Yes.
That also means it's really handy for people to be able to recognize you year to year. Yeah. I mean, by all means, like if you need to shave your beard or something silly and you don't have it on the next market, that's too bad, but people can deal with that. But if you have something on you, with you, like a bit more than your logo, because also like, having branded clothing, that helps.
Yeah.
But if there's something with what you're wearing, like the colorful overalls or the crazy ones, Heidi, you're talking about, if you have something that's like, oh, she weren't wearing that last time, but that's the only person who probably would be wearing something like it.
Yeah.
And like, it makes it just super easy to recognize and to see you and see like, oh, I bought this thing from you last time. They will not remember your name. They might not remember your brand name.
Yeah.
They might barely be able to remember what exactly they bought from you. But if they remember interacting with you, I think that's even more important.
definitely.
I try to be iconic.
Yeah. And I mean, like,
you succeed, Heidi. Don't worry. Yeah, no, that's definitely a thing on there about like whether you go down the branded clothing route or not, and all that kind of thing. It all very much depends on the feeling of your brand and what you're going to do.
And by all means, also how much you want to be out there and showing yourself off.
Oh yeah.
You can do a lot of these things without being loud and obnoxious or
Absolutely.
just up in people's faces.
Yeah.
You can. My approach to people, this is also very much covered by me being introvert and Norway being a more or less a quiet and keep to yourself country. I might even talk to a lot of the customers coming up, just because. Not only because like some people, they walk up and they have their eyes locked on the table and they just look at the table and there's no opening for me to say anything. But if I see that they stop on something and they might pick something up and I see the question sort of in their attitude, then I might approach and say something about it. But there's often people will walk up to my booth and I won't say a single word because there's nothing for me to interact with to them there. And I recognize that's also very much a country of Norway being a country where like we don't do a lot of those empty pleasantries.
Yeah,
it's a lot more happening here in Norway. If you bump into someone at the shop, nobody say anything. You just go and then move around and move on, because that's just less. I mean,
there's difference between empty pleasantries and being impolite, really. But
yeah. I mean, there's nuance to all of this, and I'm just saying,
it's a cultural difference.
This happens to work for me here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very interesting thing to mention because I think that follows on to kind of our next overall subject, which is talking about not necessarily bad experiences, but if you are on the stall on your own and you are not an extroverted or confident person, there is a possibility, and it, understandably, some people get concerned and worried about it. There is a possibility that you will end up with someone who is dominating the conversation, who is purely coming up to tell you everything that you're doing wrong, and to, potentially worst case scenario, they're saying about how bad all of your things are and all this kind of stuff. And they, in their heads, they're possibly not even trying to be mean about it. They think they're possibly being helpful or constructive, but the way that you as the creative person will interpret it will quite possibly, rile you up or upset you. Extracting yourself.
Or they're just talking annoyingly and not allowing you to interact with good customers or potentially good customers.
Yeah. They're being a time suck. They're taking you away from other people who might have bought something, but they're monopolizing your time. I mean, the one that happens with us, or certainly with me a lot, that isn't necessarily a negative, but is a time suck, is other woodturners coming up talking to me about my work, which, if there's no one else there, that's fine, because someone stood there talking to you draws people to the stand. But equally, you need to be able to extract yourself from that conversation, because the chances of another woodturner buying your woodturned items is very small, particularly if they're just talking about technique and all of that kind of stuff. That doesn't mean you should be rude. That doesn't mean you shouldn't talk to them. But extracting yourself from that situation, it can be a case of having to learn. I mean, the way that I would normally do it is say, oh, can we just hold the conversation there a moment? I've got someone over here who might be interested in something else. I mean, I don't know about you, Heidi. I think, you've probably had more experience than we have on some of these kind of things. I don't know. But how would you normally do that?
Well, because I'm an extrovert and I'm American and I'm loud and it's all those cultural things that I am an American for. I do generally get into those situations where people like my personality and would like to continue having a conversation with me. But you're right. It's one of those situations where you have to be in a place where you're confident enough to be like, I'm going to assert my time. Like, I'm going to be assertive and say, this is how much time I'm going to allot for general conversation while there's still people coming through. usually I'm not so crazy busy in my booth that I can't do like 15 minutes of small chat, right? But when it is crushingly busy, when there's a line of people, that's when I like to have someone else do the transactional things, maybe answer the transactional questions about, what's this cost? What's this made of? Is this microwave safe? And then I get to be the personality. And I feel free to be able to engage in those conversations, maybe more than 15 minutes. But I really do try to keep it down to that amount. And back very early on in our conversation, the reason that I have a chair is sometimes I have visitors that like to, maybe they're waiting for their food, or maybe they're waiting for something else to die down or a band to come on. So I like to have a place, like if I do have a visitor that has no intention of purchasing something, I have a place to put them where that they're not feeling like I'm kicking them out because I'm trying to do my job, but they can sit and, relax and wait for a bit, whether that's my husband, whether that's a friend of mine, whether that's, my dad, or, just some person that's within my sphere. Yeah. That just needs somewhere to hang out for a period of time. That way they're kind of out of the way. They have a nice place to sit. They might have some of my water that I so emphatically said I needed. But it's like, if I have someone to do the task of doing the selling, like, the whole transactional part, then I feel a lot more free to even stand outside of my tent and engage with people to draw them in. Yeah. Because you're not relegated to just standing in your tent. And if you do make friends easily, like I do, you can make friends with the people to the left and the right of you, so that, if you need to take a potty break and you don't have anybody with you, you can go take that potty break. If you want to take a lap around the other vendors and you don't have somebody, like, that's always a possibility, is just to say, hey, can you watch my booth for a minute and lock your box and grab your phone and go. Just try not to abuse it. Right. But yeah. Just long-winded way of saying I like people and I like talking, obviously.
No, but it is very important. And if you know that you are an introverted person, it might well be worth bringing along someone who is invested in what you're trying to do and is a little bit more extrovert. You want someone to be a cheerleader, but not over enthusiastic necessarily, because that can kind of work against you a little bit. But you also don't want sort of be kept in the shadow too much from that kind of a thing. It needs to be obvious that you are the person who has made the things, so that you can answer a few questions about it and that kind of stuff, which may be hard for some people. And, if that's the case and you don't feel that that is the sort of thing that you can do, then, hey, you might be prepared to just send a friend along to sell your stuff. And there's nothing
My cousin, when we were doing an event together, she made us t-shirts that said Heidi Jacobs maker and Nicole, what did it say? Helper. That there was a clear definition of like who to talk to about the actual craft and who to just like,
Yeah.
I mean, she was just as much of a cheerleader, but it was almost like having like, hi, my name is name tags.
Yeah, but that's brilliant though. That is brilliant. Because it also makes sure that like they don't expect her to know absolutely everything about the business. It's more like, I'm here to do all of the simple things. If you have technical questions, go that way.
Yeah.
How do you feel about having your image on your marketing collateral?
Like the face?
Like a photo of you doing your craft. I know, Dan, you said something about like having it in a video, but like, what about like in your banner when you design your banner or whatever?
Yeah, so I haven't got a pop-up banner yet, and it is something I want to create. But one of the reasons I haven't got it is because I want someone to come and take the photo of me turning in a very specific way. I've got the image framed in my head. I just can't take it myself, partly due to the composition required and setting up the camera and everything. I could waste a day just moving a camera around and setting the shot up and all that kind of stuff. I need like Steve or someone to just pop round and spend an hour with me and just snap a load of photos. So that's why I haven't made the pop-up banner yet, is that I very much want my face on it. I want people to see that it is me creating the things, and not posed with a non-moving lathe, but like an action shot, proper stuff coming along. So yeah, no, I'm all for it, because I think it's really important that people recognize that it is you touching the tools, making the stuff, and see the connection is there, and that you're passionate about it, that you are selling it.
Mm.
I don't know about you, Raz.
It all comes down to you're selling a story as much as a product.
Right.
And I guess I fall enough into the stereotype of people don't question the fact that I am a blacksmith when they see me behind the booth.
Which is weird.
So I never felt the need to.
But it's weird in the nicest possible way, Raz.
Yeah.
Unless you look closer and you're wearing a t-shirt, you wouldn't fit the stereotype of, certainly in the English mindset, of what a blacksmith would be. Because, you're not short, but you're certainly not 6 foot. You're not, you're not this hefty guy. You're not kind of like if anyone, I would have said Heidi's Ben is a guy who looks more like he should be a blacksmith than you do, based on first initial impressions, right? Minus the fact, I don't know, has he currently got a beard, Heidi?
He shaved it last weekend. So
okay.
Yeah,
so
he's looking like a gentle giant now.
yeah. But that, that kind of the expectation of what someone would look like when you say the word blacksmith, that kind of thing. Certainly in a Terry Pratchett world, anyway.
Yes. And I mean, I have had the same thoughts as you, Dan. I want to get some kind of banner, pop-up banner up with me doing the actual craft in a cool looking and his accurate way.
Yeah.
And not just lots of sparks and fire and then there's my face on it, kind of.
But sparks and fire is what brings people to the stand, Raz. that's kind of the contrast, isn't it?
But there's ways of doing it that can look cool, because the steel can be glowing and you can do a lot of things to make it really, really interesting. But that's sort of the same problem you mentioned. Like I haven't been able to take this time to figure out exactly how I want that to be and the composition of it. So I've just been walking around, just taking a lot of random pictures and hoping something cool will pop up that I can use for this.
Yeah.
That being said, I have recently talked to a friend of mine to come over and help me take a lot of pictures. So I hope to actually get closer to figuring out what we can do that will look cool, both like composition-wise and action-wise and things like that. But that's a whole other conversation entirely. It's like, yes, especially maybe if you don't look like the stereotype of the craft, having your face attached to doing it, I think can be really important.
Yeah.
But you need to be comfortable with all of that.
I was thinking in the context of like, if you are having someone help you, like it's another caveat of, that's not the person that's making it. So, I think that person doesn't have to.
I think that's the other side to it as well. So Heidi, you and I have both put a brand name against our stuff. You're Whitehall Pottery, I'm Bevel. Rasmus is Rasmus. That is his brand, is him, his name. So if you're calling something by a name, whatever that be, Acorn Crafts or something similar, what is that? So, and who is that? And so differentiating down exactly who the maker, creative person of that may be, like you said, as opposed to, an assistant of some description. But absolutely. Time is moving on. And I think we've covered a lot already, but before we go any further, we want to talk briefly about how to actually display at the market or get to that point. And then we'll cover the kind of the new things that we've each done to move our brands forward. So, assuming you've got all this stuff that you've got ready to bring to your market, and I'll throw in there one else, we keep adding to the list, battery stations to make sure your phone and your payment device are fully charged up. That one's always a handy one. But let's say you've got all of this stuff ready. You've got the date you're going to it. You've got all this stuff that's possibly sat in your living room because you haven't got storage space for it yet. Actually seeing what your market is, we won't, Heidi pointing at boxes all around her for a moment there. what I did before my first market was I have fortunate enough to have space in my back garden that I put up the tent that I was borrowing. First of all, so I knew how to do it, and I wasn't just embarrassed surrounding by all these other market traders on me on the day, just popping things up. And the second one was, right, how actually big is this space? How am I displaying my stock? Do I need another table? Have I got too many tables? Where am I getting, all of that kind of stuff, and doing a full mock-up. I think, Heidi, you mentioned actually drawing out a plan. Various people are a lot more organized than me. I prefer the organic feel of physically moving the stuff around. But do you plan all of your markets?
So the biggest thing is that I look at what my product, how has my product changed from my previous markets? Can I just do the same thing that I've been doing? I have obviously lots of mugs, and so I want to have shelves for that. So Ben designed me shelves to go up. So I did do some 3-dimensional planning. I took some photos, I did some illustrations, I laid it out, virtually first. And then I did set up in my driveway what I thought I would do for the execution once I had the new shelves. And that way I could tell Ben, like, oh, I need 3 shelves, I need 4 shelves, I need 2 shelves, that way he wasn't over making, and I knew kind of what my layout was going to be. Also, one thing that I learned very early on is elevate everything. Like, don't just lay things flat on a table.
Absolutely.
You want people's eyes to kind of, be able to see just about all of your product when they do a sweep through visually, even if they're not coming all the way into your booth. That way, it draws them in and they know what you're about. It's part of your, what I was talking about before, your merchandising solution is elevating your pieces. And I mean, physically elevating them up, and not just like, oh, it's high end, so it's elevated, right? Like, I don't mean it like you, like metaphorically. I also invested in a tent that had sides. Yeah. So I don't just have a pop-up tent, and it's a one-man pop-up tent. So it only takes me to be able to put up, which is nice for events that maybe Ben can't come help me or whatever. And I don't have to ask for help, which there's a lot on like Amazon that you can get. They're easy up tents and they're super, super nice. But I made sure I got one with sides. So if I needed privacy left and right, say like there's an annoying neighbor, or they, like at one show I had somebody making out the whole time they were there. So it was really nice. It's really nice to have the sides. And that way I could also, take things to my walls if I wanted to, like I said about the menu before. And then the other thing was my collateral. So my signage, my, if I wanted to like make it Christmassy and decorate, or if I wanted to hang lights, like Dan was saying, I knew how to hang the lights, where to plug them in. I am investing in a little solar panel so that I have that to be able to like charge everything, because I do have a portable little battery thing, but I've found that like after a full weekend of use, maybe by the end, I don't have enough life in that rechargeable separate battery. So the solar unit I think would be a good thing for me. And then the other thing is that I do have a pop-up banner in front, and Ben made me a wooden sign that says pottery, like Whitehall Pottery, so that there's a presentation just in front of my tent. So like if you're looking down the line of tents, you're not just seeing a bunch of white tents or like white, blue, white, green, tents. You see my signs just in front of my tent too, to kind of be a call to action, like come to my tent, there's pottery here. But I do a dry run. I haven't changed it up really at all. Usually you get a 10 by 10 space for outdoor markets. Indoor markets. Indoor markets are usually about the same. Sometimes they'll provide you with a table, sometimes you won't. So those are like good things to know before you go. Like, do I even have to take a table? Do I, like the one event I went to, they provided tents too, so I didn't even need my tent.
It's a really interesting thought as well, that if you're getting a 10 by 10 or 3 meter by 3 meter space, remember that you are paying for that as a cube space. not just as the flat space at the bottom. So you've got 3 meters high as well, if not right the way up to the pitch of the tent. And they won't, as long as nothing's tall and is dangerous and is going to hurt anyone, they won't quibble that. So if you've got a tent frame that is strong enough to support you, hanging a spider plant from some of it down that's not going to be in the way of tall people walking into it, or decorative things that aren't clutter but add and enhance what you're doing, or as exactly as you've said, Heidi, you've got shelving units that are built up, so it's not all just a table that's sat at waist high. I'm currently working on a portable sort of fold out, fold up kitchen island unit, so that's closer to being like bar height, so that my stuff's already elevated up to that, but it also gives me storage solution underneath it. There are many ways that you can play around with varying heights and everything, and not just having stuff led down. Think a lot more about kind of the favorite ones that you've been to. There was one lady who used to come and stand next to us at one of the markets we went to. She was called the Tweed Boutique, and everything she made was sort of like by hand, or machine sewn, and it was tweed and pheasant feathers and all this kind of stuff, but everything was British. So one of the first things she did was she had a really large Union Jack rug that she laid out. So it was like, come into the boutique, even though sometimes she didn't even put the tent up. She kind of like had the stands around this rug that was this boutique of come in, everything's made in the UK. And like she had a movable rack with like clothing on it, on coat hangers and all this kind of stuff. So it was like going into a clothes shop boutique type feel. I think 1 month she brought a comfy leather armchair and all this kind of stuff. It was like, it was very much, it was different. It stood out, but it was also familiar. You go slightly different with this, don't you, Raz, with your cubes?
Yeah. I think I mentioned it before, but new of this year for me is that I built a custom booth system, kind of. It's modular. It's all kinds of roughly 60 by 60 and 80 centimeter tall boxes that I link together, and I build my counter basically out of that, and I display everything on top of it. Also, sort of going with my style of things, which is fairly rustic, I have a lot of old wooden crates that I carry my stuff in, and that I then use to prop things up and get a bit of that verticality to everything.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's helped me a lot. Also because like old wooden boxes are really cool and have fantastic texture to them. And it's just super nice. And also like in my case, usually that extra bit of sturdiness helps a lot. If I'm packing a wooden crate full of steel, it turns heavy. Yeah,
so that's a very important thing as well, is you can design your thing as much as you like at home, but you've got to remember you've got to transport that. Yeah. And there's a good chance you've got to move it all on your own.
Yep.
So tables most likely need to be foldable. All of that kind of stuff, you need to be able to pack it down in a smaller space and as lightweight as possible, so that's easy for you to move.
So what I did that was accidentally brilliant is that all of my booths I can pack down and into the space of one of those cubes.
Nice.
Mostly by luck, absolutely by luck.
Don't admit that, Raz.
And it is a squeeze to get the last like top plate shoved in between all the other ones, but it works. And it's like, now it doesn't take all that much room. Now I know how much place in the car that takes, and I can plan how much stuff I can bring around it.
Excellent.
But that also goes to, which I don't think you mentioned that much earlier, is that when you're like setting things up and test running it, actually make out a plan of where things are going, especially if you're getting help.
Yeah.
So, and then label your box and say like, this is the box of heart hooks, here are the S hooks, this is nails, and have like, even if it's just on your phone, just have a rough layout of saying like, in this area, you have that, and here, going around. And then suddenly they don't need to stop you and ask you questions all the time while you're setting up.
Yeah. I would also say as well, make sure that you have one box that is either different or painted a completely different color to all the others. And that's the box that has your card reader, has your, all of the important stuff that you really, really need to make sure you've got. It is differentiated enough from the others.
Have extras. I mean, have everything you need for the market that is crucial, have that in that box.
Yeah.
Whether that is packaging tape or if that is just extra pencils
Yeah.
Or if it's a power bank, so you can keep everything charged, and just like, bring charging cables. Absolutely.
Business cards, all that kind of stuff.
Have spares of it and just have it in that special box. Also, all you need to do is grab the box and go.
Yeah.
And you don't need to double check it. You don't need to pack that special box every single time.
No, because that's the one where everything stays in that box unless you're charging the stuff up. That is where it lives. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, I think we've covered a huge amount, and we're slightly overrunning from our normal time. And I'm sure
do we have a normal time?
Well, we try and stick to an hour, and we're about an hour 20 now.
Oh, okay.
So anything we've missed, I'm sure will be covered in future episodes. This is a huge topic, but hopefully you've all found this very helpful. So before we kind of start talking about where you can find us, as we ask every time, and we'll start with you, Rasmus, what's the one thing you've done since we last spoke that is pushing your business forward towards its overall goal?
I have planned out 2 separate events I'll be hosting in my new forge to basically both one to get other smiths in there and sort of show the fact that this is something you can do, and also for the local community to make them see what I'm doing.
That sounds fun.
First one is actually going to be forging log dogs for Ukraine that they use to build trenches.
Nice.
Which they need hundreds of. So I hope you get a lot of those done. And the other one is basically just having a weekend open forge with sort of the boutique corner kind of nicely displayed. We'll see how that goes. But
lovely. Heidi, what about you?
Sure. I focused on Halloween this last couple of weeks. I threw a ton of Halloween mugs and started my marketing phase for that.
Okay, and can we just confirm what month we're in at the moment?
We're in at the end of August.
There we go. Just for people to put into perspective when you should start planning for.
I live in America. We plan everything 4 months in advance.
No. I'm saying this as a positive, Heidi. I'm like this. You need to be thinking about that. That whole kind of thing.
Yeah,
I'm
actually,
trying to put Christmas stock at the moment.
I've sold a lot of what I've prepped for Halloween already. Which is, I live in America.
Yeah.
Halloween is all year round here.
Yeah.
It's more important than Christmas.
Yeah.
So I did a bunch of things that I normally do. And then I also experimented. This is like my opportunity to play in my studio versus, doing batch work for everybody else. But I also am onboarding a couple of new shops at the moment. So that's exciting. And I finally got around to updating my online store with everything that I should have had uploaded over the summer, but was lazy in the way that I can be lazy.
Yeah. Okay. So we won't dwell on that one. Okay. Well, I can't remember if one of them I've spoken about previously, but I did 2 different things. One of them is I did some 3 days worth of training with some wood turning masters in the UK, which sounds a lot more Jedi or ninja than it actually was. But that has given me a lot more confidence in using certain types of tool, which will be more efficient in the long run and less scary to use. And the second one was that I finally went ahead and made some kitchen utensils, so some spatulas. I can't remember if I mentioned that last time or not. But rather than everything being round, so made some things for stirrers and things like that, which tend to be lower budget. And it adds different shapes and variety to the content of the stand. Okay, so then, if you want to reach us as a collective, you can find us at Setting Up Shop, SHOPPE, on Instagram and on Facebook. Our email address is info@settingupshop.com. And we do still have a website. Whether or not you can see it live or not is another question. I'm still wrestling with that for the moment. Hopefully by the time you hear this, it will all be live and everything else. As private individuals, you can find me on Instagram at Bevelwood UK, and you can find Heidi at Whitehall_pottery. Yeah, I must remember that one. And then Rasmus is at Rasmus Stensgaard, or at Rasmus Loen is actually what his individual thing is there. So thank you very much for listening. Cheers. Thank you very much for chatting again, guys. And we'll see you again soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.